The Buccaneers reclaim sole possession of first place in the NFC South. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome into this live post-game reaction episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, here with you every Monday through Friday, along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Biggest takeaways and game balls coming up in a little bit. But let's start with the biggest moment in this one. Look, big-time players make big-time plays, and there wasn't a bigger play than what Mike Evans did on 3rd and 9 with his 32-yard catch, run, and hurdle. With 11 minutes left in the game, the Bucs were clinging to a 14-10 lead, facing 3rd and 9 from their own 24. Baker finds Evans over the middle. He makes a huge catch, then takes off and runs, hurdles a defender, and picks up more yards to get the Bucs into Raiders territory. 3 plays later, Rachaad White is in the end zone to give the Bucs an 11-point lead with a little more than 8.5 minutes to play in the game. This offense was reeling for most of the day, and they started off on fire with touchdowns from Rachaad White and Jalen McMillan in the first 2 drives. But after that, it was 3 turnovers. It was 3 punts. They couldn't seem to get anything going, and it did not help that Bucky was out after re-aggravating his back injury, but Baker was all out of sorts. The offensive line was being absolutely abused. The coverage down the field by the Vegas secondary was really impressive, which led to bad plays for the Bucs offense. This offense was desperate for a shot in the arm, and Mike Evans provided exactly that. It was not a banner day for Mike Evans, only 69 yards on the day, so he needs 102.5 yards per game the rest of the season to hit 1,000, but he is far more concerned with getting wins than he is his own record streak continuing. That was more than evident when he was screaming on the sideline at the defense on the Raiders' following drive that ended in a field goal. But those are the situations where you have to lean on your stars. They're the ones that have to come up in big moments and will this team to victory. Cade Otton came up big on the last drive. Levante David came up big throughout the game. Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey were bringing tons of pressure. That's what you need out of your studs. But it went beyond those guys. Kayvon Merriweather was outstanding after Antoine Winfield Jr. left the game with a knee injury. Sean Tucker had a huge run to set up Rashaad's second touchdown. Christian Izien made some big-time tackles. Jalen McMillan and Sterling Shepard both had really good days. Obviously, Jalen McMillan had the 2 touchdown catches. Shepard, 2 of his 4 receptions against the Raiders came on 3rd down and extended drives. This was another week where the Bucs sputtered and barely kept their head above water, but managed to finish strong when it mattered the most. And credit to the Buccaneers defense. Truly, honestly, they kept the Buccaneers in this game most of the day. 2 interceptions were taken away after replay review. But think about the players that they didn't have. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, Mike Edwards, Jordan Whitehead, KJ Britt, J.J. Russell. They lose Antoine during the game. They were on their 3rd string safeties and linebackers because of injuries and still managed to do what they needed to in order to get the win. The Raiders opened the second half with a 16-play drive that took over 10 minutes and finished with no points because of a heads-up play by Tykee Smith to get an interception. If he doesn't cut off Brock Bowers' route, that's a touchdown. And the Raiders take the lead. I know we all want to bag on Todd Bowles. I said on the Blitz this week with Evan Klosky and David Shealy that Bowles is still very much on the hot seat. But a lot of these woes are beyond his control. He cannot effectively run his defense with half of his starters and their backups being sidelined with injury. There were fans on Twitter that I saw that were turning on Liam Cohen, saying that he should go be a head coach somewhere else and the Bucs would still have a top 10 offense next season. And to me, that's just insane. The problems on offense were not on Liam Cohen in this game. They were on execution. Baker was missing guys and holding the ball too long. The O-line was getting beat. So even if there was someone open, Baker was under heavy duress and being hit and not having time to set and throw the ball downfield. It wasn't on play calling. It was on execution. At the end of the day, an ugly win is still a win. And thanks to the Minnesota Vikings absolutely abusing the Atlanta Falcons here in the month of Kirk-Sember, the Bucs are in first place in the NFC South and sitting at the 4 seed in the NFC playoff picture. Now, the Bucs could have moved up to the 3 seed if the Arizona Cardinals were able to beat the Seattle Seahawks. That game just went final. The Seahawks won. They are still the 3 seed. The Bucs are the 4 seed. So if the season ended today, the Bucs would host the Washington Commanders in the first round of the playoffs. There are still 4 weeks to go, and the Bucs have a tough road game next week at the Chargers. The Falcons are traveling to Vegas to take on these Raiders that the Bucs just faced today. So maybe a Desmond Ridder revenge game for the Raiders, but you have to assume that the Falcons win that one so the Falcons can turn around and take first place back by this time next week. But essentially what you're looking at now is the Bucs doing what they had to do to control their own destiny. A big reason for that was Mike Evans' catch on that 3rd and 9 in that pivotal moment in the fourth quarter that set up Rachaad White's touchdown to put this game out of reach for the Las Vegas Raiders. I'm going to jump into the live chat here. We got Daytona Dad. I have not seen Daytona Dad in the chat in forever. Welcome back. I missed you. He says, tuning in from SeaWorld San Diego. I will be at the game next week versus the Chargers. Hope Baker can play better next week. Well, I definitely hope that you have a great time at the game and that these Bucs are able to give you a win. Have a great time at SeaWorld. That was always one of my favorite trips as a kid. We used to go up. There was a SeaWorld in Northern Ohio. My mom loved to go, so we would go up there, about every other summer there for a couple of years. Always a great time. Scotty J says, I'm scared of the Panthers looking forward. The Panthers are tough right now. They gave the Eagles everything they wanted and more. It came down to a drop by Xavier Legette at the very end of the game, but they're starting to click. Dave Canales and Bryce Young have those guys playing really, really tough. Benjamin says, unreal people dissing Cohen. I'm not surprised. This is 2 weeks in a row that the offense has struggled. You're going to point to the offensive coordinator. I had people getting angry at me on Twitter for blaming the offensive line for not playing well in this game because it's obviously all Baker Mayfield's fault. It just depends on who you're talking to and what their personal agenda is. I do think it's kind of nuts to say that the Bucs should let Liam Cohen walk and, that this offense would be every bit as good without Liam Cohen as it is with. I don't think that's the case. Even with Dave Canales last year, they were nowhere as good as they are with Liam Cohen this year. But I get it. It's back-to-back frustrating games where the offense seemed to sputter and shoot themselves in the foot. And a lot of people are going to blame the offensive coordinator for that. Bantry says way too many missed tackles, par for the course. I saw Jenna Lane talking about that on one of Sincere McCormick's runs. And then she ended up having to adjust the tweet and say, yes, I realize that this team has had trouble tackling all season. I was talking more in terms of the first quarter versus the second quarter. But, I'm going to talk more about the defense and what we're kind of seeing from them as part of the biggest takeaways on both sides of the ball. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. History, economics, the great works of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. Did you study these things in school? Probably not. But even if you did, maybe it's time for a refresher. Time and technology have changed a lot of things, but have not changed basic fundamental truths about the world and our place in it. Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the U.S. Constitution, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic, and a personal favorite of mine, Mark Twain, Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn, and selected short stories. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever, plus go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just sit back and enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/locked-on to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/locked-on to register, hillsdale.edu/locked-on. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It is the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. It's the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so your lineups stay in play even if one of your players leaves in the first half and doesn't return. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quickly as 15 minutes. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL, all lowercase, all one word, to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listener review every day. The new Locked On NFL is here, and it's twice a day. You got the Madman Tyler Rowland kicking off your morning. Then you can stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Add in the Locked On local experts. You get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's a new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. Make it your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Caden in the chat. Hey, first live finally here. Caden, welcome in. So glad you were able to make it. Always love seeing people join their first live show. Lakita says, well, I will stick with Cohen and Mayfield. Thank you very much. I am right there with you, as are a lot of people in the chat. I see. And then I saw one other one. Yeah, William. Liam Cohen has put our offense in a great position. Top 10 offense, top 10 rushing offense. Think about what he, and of course, you got to give credit to Bucky Irving too, what they've been able to do with this run game and pull it out of the bottom of the NFL from the past couple of years to being one of the best in the league. I mean, it was at the bottom of the NFL in the early part of this season, and they've been able to improve it to one of the better rushing attacks in the NFL. Look, Liam Cohen has done a phenomenal job, and I think a lot of times they get caught in the moment. Once you remove yourself, take some time to cool off, things like that, you start to see things a little bit differently. But here are my biggest takeaways from this one. On offense, Baker has to be better. And I get a lot of hate on social media for being a Baker homer, and, I make excuses for him and yada, yada, yada. I don't feel that I do. I feel I call it like I see it. And we've talked about it before, where if Baker has an interception in a game, it's more than likely that he's going to have a second one than it is that he finishes with just the one interception. This game, he had 2 interceptions and lost a fumble, so 3 total turnovers. Now, to be fair to Baker, I don't think the first interception was his fault. It was an absolutely incredible play by Chason to tip it and catch the ball, so you just tip your cap and point out what an incredible defensive play that was. The fumble, I also don't think that was on Baker. He had absolutely no time, no shot against that blitz that the Raiders sent. The O-line was overpowered, and it was just an unfortunate result. The final interception, 100% on Baker. That was a bad ball. Tuck it, eat the sack, or don't throw that ball at all. But he was under duress, gets hit as he throws, can't step into it, and just kind of lofts in an airmail ball that's easily intercepted in the end zone. Look, he's holding the ball too long, and again, credit to the Raiders' coverage down the field. But you cannot force those plays because bad things are going to happen. Bucs fans love Baker. I love watching and covering Baker because he never gives up on a play and he's always trying to make something happen. But sometimes that's a detriment and not an asset. In this game against the Raiders, it was a detriment. Baker now has 28 touchdowns and 13 interceptions on the season. And while a touchdown to interception ratio a little over 2-1 is fine, it's not as good as it should be. If the Bucs get into the playoffs, which it looks like they're going to, the Bucs are not going to be able to overcome this many mistakes against teams like the Washington Commanders or the Green Bay Packers or the Minnesota Vikings or the Atlanta Falcons. They're able to overcome their mistakes right now because they're going against teams that are just not as talented or that make even more mistakes than the Bucs do. We need to see Baker doing a better job of protecting the football and making smarter decisions. This has been one of the best third down teams in the NFL all season. They were 5 for 12 against the Raiders, but still came into this game as the second best third down conversion rate team in the league. We'll see what Sunday's 41.6% conversion rate does for their overall average. But Baker has to trust that sometimes throwing away a play is better than taking a sack or turning the ball over. Sometimes taking the sack is better than forcing a pass and getting it intercepted. Sometimes you just want to throw the ball away and then trust your offensive coordinator, trust Liam Cohen to dial up the right play for the next snap and stop putting the offense in tough positions that they have to crawl out of. Because more often than not this year, Liam Cohen has drawn up the right play the next time around to convert those third downs or to cut second and long into third and manageable. You have to trust that. I know Baker's a gamer. I know he's got that mentality where he's never going to quit on a play. He's not going to give up. He's dealing with some sort of injury. They talked about it on the telecast where his foot or his ankle or both are injured, but he's not going to throw in the towel. Sometimes it's okay to throw in the towel on a play and just live to see the next one. Otherwise, you run a really, really high risk chance of putting your team in a bad situation. And we saw that way too often last week against the Panthers and then this week against the Raiders. You cannot afford to do it on the road against the Chargers next week. Defensively, my biggest takeaway is some people might not love it, but it's that the Bucs defense, honestly, is doing as well as you can expect given the circumstances. They are without 5 starters, plus 3 of the next men up. Lost in the shuffle of all these injuries that we have talked about week after week after week is the fact that Servassier Dennis was a big part of this defense, and he has been out most of the season. And that's not something that we ever talk about a lot because he has been out for months. But that is a huge part of who this defense was. They are without their top 3 safeties. They are without a starting linebacker and his backup. They're without a starting edge rusher. They're without one of their top rotational defensive linemen. They just got their starting nickel corner back for the first time since before the bye week. This version of the Todd Bowles defense has been bad this season, but they haven't had their full allotment of starters one time. They started the year without Kalijah Kancey and didn't have him for a month. They lost Antoine Winfield Jr. at the end of the first game. He was out for a month, and then they lost him again today. Zion McCollum has left games with injury. Jamel Dean missed a month. Vita Vea has missed time. Tykee Smith has missed time. Edwards joins the team, plays less than 2 full games, and he's out. It's honestly insane how many injuries the Bucs have had to deal with just on the defensive side of the ball. This isn't taking into account injuries to Tristan Wirfs or Luke Gedeke or Chris Godwin or Mike Evans or Rachaad White or Bucky Irving or Jalen McMillan. So while the Bucs are towards the bottom of the league in defense, they haven't had anywhere close to the level of talent that we thought that they would entering the season. And that's not because we overestimated the talent that they had. It's because they haven't had the players. That doesn't mean that they don't need upgrades at edge rusher or linebacker or corner. But they should be a lot better than this, and they aren't, because they're relegated to practice squad call-ups and off-the-street signings. So while I think the Bucs are probably ready to turn the page and move on from the Todd Bowles era, barring some sort of miracle run to the NFC Championship and the playoffs, it's hard to put the blame solely on Todd Bowles when so much of this is beyond his control. There's only so much that he can do with the hand that he's dealt, and he's been dealt a really crappy hand this year. The defense was able to answer the call and pick up the offense today. The offense has had to pick up the defense throughout the season. But when you really put it all into perspective, it's pretty impressive what the Bucs have been able to do, getting to a 7-6 record and taking back first place. Going to hand out the game balls coming up next after the Bucs' first home win since the month of September. Start dropping your game balls in the chat, because that is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. The Buccaneers are now plus 6,000 to win the Super Bowl, while the Falcons have plummeted to plus 12,000. The Lions are firmly the favorite at plus 270, ahead of the Chiefs, who are atop the AFC teams in Super Bowl odds at plus 500. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Wrapping things up here on a post-game live edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast. Ted in the chat says, James, do you feel Bowles' job is safe? And do you think the Bucs should block teams from interviewing? I'm assuming you mean block teams from interviewing Liam Cohen. They cannot block Liam Cohen from interviewing for head coaching positions. You could only block him from interviewing for other offensive coordinator positions, so they would have no control over that. But honestly, no, I do not feel that Todd Bowles' job is safe at all. I do think that it takes a run to the NFC Championship in order to secure his job. Given the problems on the defense, I realized I just went through a litany of reasons why it's not solely on Todd Bowles. But if the Bucs feel that they are in a situation where they're going to lose Liam Cohen, if they don't promote him to head coach, you might see them move on. And again, Todd Bowles may retire. He has talked about how he is nearing the end of his coaching career and is looking to retire. You know, I don't know how much that is going to play into it. So there's still plenty of time. There's still a lot of factors at play. I would say that right now it's a coin toss. It's a 50-50 shot as to whether or not Todd Bowles stays or goes. All right. Game ball time. My golden game ball in this was tough because there were a lot of guys that did a really solid job for the Bucs in this game. No one really exploded or really stood out, but I have to give the first game ball to Rachaad White. He gets my golden game ball for this game. 109 total yards. He had 90 on the ground and 2 touchdowns. It's the first time that he's had a receiving and a rushing touchdown in the same game. 5.3 yards per carry, 5.7 yards per touch. And honestly, he really stepped up in Bucky Irving's absence. He ran much more like the Rachaad that we saw down the stretch last year compared to what we saw in the early part of this year. Really started to get things going, and he was running angry. He was running tough. There were plenty of times he was bottled up in a pile after gaining 1 or 2 yards, and all of a sudden he just kept pushing and pushing and pushing and ended up gaining 4, 5, 6 yards. Outstanding job from Rachaad White in this one. Game ball number 2, my top defensive game ball, it's going to Tykee Smith. Huge interception on the Raiders' opening drive of the second half. And I mentioned it before, if he doesn't cut off that route by Brock Bowers, it is a touchdown, and the Raiders take a 17-14 lead. There was no one behind Tykee with enough time to stop Bowers before he would have reached the goal line. That was a game-changing play. He finished with 3 tackles, 2 passes defensed, but there was not a defensive play bigger or more important than Tykee Smith's interception. Game ball number 3, my second offensive game ball, goes to Mike Evans. Only 69 yards on 4 receptions. He had just 5 targets, but he had the play of the game, moving the Bucs into Raiders territory on that 3rd and 9, where he made a great catch that hurdles a defender. And maybe I'm wrong. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but is this the first time that we've really seen Evans hurdle a defensive player? Because that was awesome, and it was slightly insane. He was trying to will the Bucs to victory in that moment, and I don't remember in 11 years of watching Mike Evans play football, him ever having a play quite like that one. That was a galvanizing moment. It was the shot in the arm that the Bucs offense needed, like I mentioned at the top of the show. And for that play alone, Mike Evans just narrowly squeaked out Jalen McMillan for the second offensive game ball in this game. And then game ball number 4, my other defensive game ball, goes to Lavonte David. A team-high 7 tackles, had a sack on the opening drive, a key fumble recovery, relentless pressure on a lot of these blitzes. He continues to prove that he is hogging the fountain of youth as he plays like he's still 25, but he has been one of the few constants for the Buccaneers defense this season. I am going to throw out an honorable mention. I don't normally do an honorable mention game ball, but Kayvon Merriweather was unbelievable in this game. He was just brought back this week and then gets thrust into the game with the injury to Antoine Winfield Jr. Nearly had his first career pick. It was overturned correctly, albeit on replay, but he tied Lavonte David for a team-high 7 tackles. He had a sack. He played unbelievably well considering the situation that he was put in and what he was tasked with doing. And I felt it was only appropriate to give Kayvon some much-deserved love on this show. Going to jump in here and see who all you guys are giving out game balls to. We got Lakita says Merriweather. We've got Chet says Lavonte David on defense. On offense, probably Rachaad White. Benjamin says game ball to David. He was everywhere today, played outstanding. Runner-up is Kayvon Merriweather. Demon Hunter says, I think Cansey officially used his get out of jail free game ball. Yeah, he got away with a late hit there on Aiden O'Connell that unfortunately resulted in an injury. Though I watched that play probably a dozen times, and I still can't figure out where that injury came from. I guess it was a knee. So maybe it's not something that really showed up on the broadcast, but that's why he had the air cast put on and he was carted off. He is dealing with a knee injury. Well wishes, of course, to Aiden O'Connell. I hope he has a quick recovery. Richard says game balls to Rachaad White, Lavonte David, and Kayvon Merriweather. Narav says offense goes to J-Mac, Jalen McMillan, and the defense goes to everyone. We've got Wenzen. Tykee Smith gets a game ball. Caden gives one to Kayvon Merriweather. So, yeah, a lot of people giving it to Kayvon, Lavonte, Rachaad, Jalen McMillan. And look, Jalen McMillan, what a game for him. He had some incredible catches. His first multi-touchdown game. His first touchdown since week 1. And he ends up doubling up the day after his 23rd birthday. So it was great to see him get more involved, and hopefully that gives him a little bit more confidence and gives Baker a little bit more confidence in Jalen to become a bigger part of this offense. They're still really looking for that guy to step up and fill the shoes that were vacated by Chris Godwin. Shepard has had moments. Cade Otton has had moments. Cade Otton with a grown man catch and run on that final drive that led to Jalen McMillan's second touchdown catch. But you hope that this is kind of the start of something for Jalen McMillan, and he starts to be able to live up to a lot of the preseason, post-draft, training camp hype that, I'm as guilty of it as anyone, but he looked so great. And then all of a sudden had some injuries pile up, had a couple of bad drops in a couple of situations. Hopefully this is what kickstarts him and he becomes an absolute monster down the stretch for the rest of the year. Richard in the chat says, our punter didn't get a penalty, so he gets a game ball. Yeah, I don't think that Browning is the answer a punter. He was not good. So I fully expect the Bucs to bring in a punter or two to try out during practice this week. Honestly, Kendall Gill would have had similar or maybe even better results than Browning did in this one. And then Lakita says, fire the dang cannons. Just don't let anyone else on the defense get hurt or we all have to go in. Yeah, pretty much. They are, I think Scotty J was the one that said it earlier in the chat. Our safety was working at Starbucks last week. Yeah, they're 100% going to start hiring people from Target and Starbucks and bread routes. Yeah, I'm available. So, just throwing that out there for the Bucs. But that is going to do it for this episode of Locked On Bucs. Please check out everything going on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @Yarcho_Bucs. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. And make sure you are subscribed on YouTube or with the notifications turned on so you know when I go live with all of you first-time livers. Turn on that notification bell so that when I go live, you know about it. And, of course, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding Victory Monday. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.